Welcome to Life Stories, where we explore the powerful, emotional, and unexpected journeys that shape our lives. Today, we dive into a tale of family, resilience, and finding your voice against all odds. Natasha has spent her life being the invisible one, overlooked and underestimated by her own family. But when a lavish wedding becomes the center of everyone's attention, Natasha seizes the opportunity to show them the strength and success they've always ignored. What unfolds is a story of revelation, redemption, and the true meaning of family. Subscribe now to start today's unforgettable journey with Life Stories. The house was quiet, save for the low hum of my mother's voice carrying through the thin walls. I had just arrived home after another long day at work, my bag still slung over my shoulder when her words pierced through the air like an unwelcome gust of cold wind. "It's just Emily. She'll understand if we cancel the vacation. She always does." I froze in the hallway, my hand clutching the edge of the doorframe. My mother's tone was dismissive, as if this decision was inevitable and I, Emily Parker, the ever-reliable daughter, would simply nod and accept it without question. My father's voice followed, quieter but no less clear. "But we've already paid the deposit for the beach house. It's been 15 years of tradition." "Douglas says Claire's wedding venue alone is costing a fortune," my mother interrupted. "And you know how special this is for her. She's been dreaming of her perfect day since she was a little girl." Claire. Of course. My cousin. The golden child of the family. The one everyone rallied around, no matter the cost. The one whose desires always seemed to eclipse everyone else's needs. I pressed my back against the wall, my fists clenched at my sides. The thought of cancelling the annual family vacation, a tradition my late grandparents had started for her wedding, made my chest tighten with frustration. This vacation wasn't just a trip, it was a rare moment of togetherness in a family that otherwise seemed to function on schedules and obligations. Before I could dwell further, my mother's voice startled me as she appeared in the living room doorway. "Oh, Emily, I didn't hear you come in. You never do," I muttered under my breath. She tilted her head, frowning slightly. "What was that?" "Nothing," I replied, forcing a smile. "I just came to drop off those photos you wanted for Claire's wedding slideshow." Her face lit up, and she clasped her hands together. "Oh, perfect. Claire will be so pleased. She's been so stressed about getting everything together. The venue is gorgeous, but it's stretching everyone thin." It was the last straw. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "So thin that you're cancelling the vacation?" Her smile faltered, and a shadow crossed her face. "Oh, you heard that. Kind of hard not to." My mother sighed, placing a hand on her hip. "Honey, you know how important this is for Claire, and you've always been so good with money, saving and budgeting. Unlike some people," she trailed off, giving me that look, the one that simultaneously praised my practicality while reducing me to the family's financial safety net. My phone buzzed in my pocket, mercifully breaking the tension. A message from Rosalie, my best friend. "Still on for drinks?" "I have to go," I said, already heading for the door. "Emily." "Wait," my father called from the hallway. "We should talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, turning the doorknob. "I understand. I always do." "Right." I didn't wait for a response. The drive to the Copper Pot, my usual meeting spot with Rosalie, was a blur of angry tears and white-knuckled steering. By the time I slid into our booth, she took one look at me and ordered 2 martinis. "Spill," she demanded, sliding one glass toward me. "They're cancelling the family vacation to help pay for Claire's wedding," I said, taking a long sip. 15 years of tradition, gone because Princess Claire needs the perfect venue. Rosalie's eyebrows shot up. "The Belmont Manor? That's where she's having it." "Right." I nodded, letting out a bitter laugh. "The tyranny is killing me, Roz. The kicker, they have no idea I own the place." Rosalie nearly choked on her drink. "You what?" I shook my head. feeling a mix of amusement and exasperation. They don't know about my business partnership with Ethan. To them, I'm still the accountant pushing papers in a cubicle. Her eyes widened as the realization dawned. Emily, you're telling me your family is breaking the bank to rent your venue? Yep. I sighed, swirling my drink. And they'll never know because, God forbid, anyone asks about my life. Rosalie smirked, leaning back in her chair. You could just tell them. You know. And prove them right about me being the family disappointment. No thanks. I paused, a new idea flickering in the back of my mind. But maybe. Emily. Rosalie said cautiously, her voice low. What are you thinking? Nothing yet. I replied, pulling out my phone and texting Ethan. Let's meet tomorrow. I have some special requirements for this event. Rosalie narrowed her eyes. This is going to be interesting. Isn't it? I clinked my glass against hers, a calm settling over me for the first time all day. Oh, Roz. It's going to be more than interesting. For the first time in my life, I was ready to claim my space, my voice, and my place in the family. This time, I wouldn't be just Emily. The Belmont Manor gates creaked open as I pulled up in my car. Even after 2 years of co-owning this place with Ethan, the grandeur of the Victorian mansion never failed to leave me in awe. The early morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the meticulously landscaped grounds. To think this was where Claire would have her wedding, my family, oblivious to the fact that I had made this place what it was. There's my favorite silent partner. Ethan called from the front steps, his usual grin in place. He was impeccably dressed in a sharp suit, but his easygoing charm made him feel more like a lifelong friend than a business partner. I stepped out of the car and joined him on the steps. Ready to plan the Parker family's perfect day, he asked, his tone teasing. Just show me the contract, I said flatly, brushing past him into the grand foyer. The main hall was a masterpiece of elegance, polished marble floors, a sweeping staircase, and glittering chandeliers. As my heels clicked across the floor, I couldn't help but think about all the events we'd hosted here. Weddings, galas, corporate retreats, it had all been for strangers. But this time, the event felt deeply personal. Ethan followed me into his office, his footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. He handed me a folder as he sat behind his desk. Care to explain why you're charging your own family the full premium package? Plus a little extra? I glanced over the numbers, my lips curling into a smirk. Because they don't know it's my venue. National don't dodge the question, Ethan said, using my old nickname. You weren't there yesterday. You didn't hear them cancel our family vacation like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. Ethan leaned back, studying me. Fair enough, he said. But what's your endgame here? Before I could answer, voices drifted in from the hallway. I froze, instantly recognizing Claire's saccharine tone. She was here for her first tour of the venue, with her fiancé, Jude, in tow. No doubt. Ethan glanced at me and gestured toward the connecting office door. Quick. Hide in there. This is going to be good. I slipped into the side room just as Claire and Jude entered. Through the thin wall, I could hear Claire's effervescent voice bubbling over with excitement. Mr. Dawson, she said, her words dripping with sweetness. Thank you so much for fitting us in today. Please. Call me Ethan, he replied smoothly. Shall we begin the tour? I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Ethan's professional charm never failed to impress. Even when dealing with someone like Claire, I pressed my ear against the wall, listening to their footsteps fade as they moved further into the manor. My phone buzzed with a text from Rosalie. How's the tour going? Hidden like a spy yet? I smiled and texted back, you know it. Watching the princess admire my castle. As I followed at a safe distance, I caught glimpses of Claire twirling around the grand ballroom, her arms outstretched like she owned the place. Jude trailed behind her, looking slightly overwhelmed. And these chandeliers? Claire gushed. craning her neck to admire them. "Daddy, aren't they just perfect?" I hadn't even noticed Uncle Douglas was there until he spoke. "Whatever makes you happy, Princess," he said. "Though the price tag is quite steep. But worth every penny," Ethan interjected smoothly, catching my eye as I peeked around a corner. He quickly looked away, hiding a grin. Claire turned to him, her curiosity piqued. "I've heard the mysterious owner never shows up to events. Is that true?" I bit my lip to keep from laughing. The mysterious owner narrative was something Ethan and I had deliberately cultivated. It added to the venue's allure while conveniently keeping my identity hidden. "The owner prefers to remain private," Ethan replied diplomatically, "but they're very involved in operations." "How fascinating," Claire mused. "Maybe they'll make an exception for my wedding. It is going to be the event of the season. After all." "Oh, I can guarantee the owner will be there," Ethan said, his voice laced with amusement. My phone buzzed again. This time a text from my mother. "Claire's touring the venue today. Isn't it exciting? Maybe you could help. You're so good with details." I typed back, "Sure, Mom. I'd love to help plan things at the Belmont Manor." The irony of it all made me laugh quietly to myself. Watching Claire flit about, oblivious to the fact that she was walking through my venue, filled me with a strange sense of satisfaction. She had no idea that the mysterious owner she so desperately wanted to meet was hiding in plain sight. And when the time came, I would make sure my family saw me for who I really was, not the invisible cousin, but the woman who built this legacy. They just didn't know it yet. The following weeks passed in a blur of meetings, plans, and a growing sense of anticipation. Every text from my mother or Claire was dripping with requests, expectations, and subtle jabs that I had grown all too familiar with over the years. But I handled them all with a calm exterior, knowing the perfect moment to reveal the truth was getting closer. Ethan, however, was getting increasingly wary. "You're playing with fire, Natasha," he said one afternoon as we reviewed a list of Claire's ever-growing demands in his office. "Are you sure this isn't going to blow up in your face?" I shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Ethan, you've seen my family. Blowing up is practically our love language." He smirked but didn't look entirely convinced. "It's just, this isn't a small stunt. Once you reveal the truth, it's not something you can take back." "I'm not looking to take it back," I replied firmly. "I've spent my whole life being invisible to them. Ethan, just Natasha, the reliable one, the one who understands. This isn't just about the venue or the wedding. It's about finally being seen." Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "All right. But just know I'll be here if you need damage control. Always the diplomat," I teased. But his support meant more to me than I could say. The day of the rehearsal dinner arrived, and the energy at Belmont Manor was electric. My family was buzzing with excitement. Claire most of all. The grand dining room was lit with golden chandeliers, the long tables adorned with elegant floral arrangements and gleaming silverware. Every detail was immaculate, down to the custom monogrammed napkins Claire had insisted on. I watched from the shadows as guests mingled, my red dress a bold contrast to the neutral tones everyone else seemed to favor. The air was thick with the hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, and the occasional burst of laughter. Claire was glowing, basking in the attention of everyone around her. Jude, meanwhile, looked distracted, his brow furrowed as he stood off to the side. "Ready for the big moment?" Ethan's voice came from behind me, low enough that only I could hear. "More than ready," I replied, my heart racing with a mix of nerves and anticipation. "Let's do this." Ethan tapped his glass, the clear sound cutting through the room and bringing the chatter to a halt. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice smooth and commanding. "As many of you know, Belmont Manor is one of the most exclusive venues in the state. And tonight, we're honored to host the Parker family for this very special occasion. But there's something else that makes this event particularly unique. The room fell silent. All eyes on Ethan as he continued. This evening, you'll have the rare privilege of meeting the owner of Belmont Manor. A murmur rippled through the room, curiosity lighting up the faces of my family. Claire looked particularly intrigued, her head tilted in anticipation. Ethan's eyes met mine briefly before he smiled and gestured toward the doorway where I stood. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce someone who's been here all along, the owner of Belmont Manor, Natasha Rivera. For a moment, there was silence. Then, as I stepped forward, the gasps began. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide in shock. My father's expression was unreadable, though his grip on his wine glass tightened. Claire, on the other hand, looked as though she'd been struck by lightning. Her face turned pale, her jaw slack. "You," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Yes," I replied, my voice calm but steady. "Me. The cousin you've all overlooked. The one who was always just Natasha. Well, now you know Natasha Rivera owns the venue you mortgaged your house to afford." The room erupted into chaos. My father tried to say something, but Claire's shrill voice drowned him out. "You knew all along. You let us book this place just to humiliate me." "Humiliate you?" I repeated, my voice sharp now. "Claire, this isn't about humiliation. This is about finally being seen. You've spent your whole life in the spotlight, and I've spent mine in the shadows. Well, not anymore." My mother stood, her face a mixture of shock and something else I couldn't quite place. "Natasha," she said quietly, "why didn't you tell us? Would you have listened?" I shot back, my voice cracking with years of pent-up emotion. "When have any of you ever listened to me? I've been working hard, building something for myself, and none of you even noticed." The room fell silent again, the weight of my words sinking in. For once, I was the one holding the attention, and it felt both liberating and terrifying. But as I looked around, at my family's stunned faces and Claire's furious glare, I felt something else, a sense of closure. For better or worse, they finally saw me, and that was all I had ever wanted. The silence hung heavy in the room, broken only by the faint clinking of silverware and the occasional shuffle of someone shifting in their seat. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. My mother was the first to break the quiet. "Natasha," she said again, her voice trembling. "We didn't know. I didn't know. Why didn't you tell us? Why did you let it get to this point?" "Because it never would have mattered," I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. "You've always had a way of dismissing me. Mom, if I'd told you, it would have been the same as always. That's nice." "Natasha." Anyway, back to Claire. "This wasn't about revenge, it was about making sure you actually saw me." Claire scoffed, the sound cutting through the tension. "So, you hijacked my wedding? That's what this is about? Making everything about you?" I turned to her, meeting her angry glare with one of my own. "Claire, this is still your wedding. The venue is yours for the day. The flowers, the decor, the grand staircase, all for you. The only thing that's changed is that you know who owns it. Why is that such a problem for you?" Her face reddened. But before she could respond, my father cleared his throat. "All right. Enough," he said, his voice firm. "This isn't the time or place for a family fight." "Isn't it?" I shot back, feeling a fire I'd kept suppressed for years finally surface. "Because it seems like the only time anyone ever listens is when there's an audience." My father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I shifted my gaze around the room, at the faces of my family, some confused, some ashamed. "Do you have any idea how it feels to always be overlooked?" I asked, my voice shaking. "To be the one who understands, who makes sacrifices, who fades into the background so everyone else can shine? I've spent my whole life being just Natasha, the quiet one, the reliable one, and I'm done." "Natasha," my mother began, But I held up a hand to stop her. No, I said, my tone softening but still firm. You don't get to smooth this over. Not this time. For a moment. No one spoke. Then, to everyone's surprise, Jude, the groom, who had remained silent through most of this, stood up. He looked at Claire, his expression unreadable. She's not wrong, he said quietly. Claire's head snapped toward him. Excuse me? She's not wrong. Jude repeated, his voice louder now. You do take her for granted. We all do. And honestly, it's exhausting. The room was stunned into silence again. Claire stared at him, her mouth opening and closing as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. I can't believe you're siding with her, she finally said, her voice trembling with rage. I'm not siding with anyone. Jude replied calmly, I'm just saying that maybe, for once, Natasha deserves to be heard. Claire looked like she might explode. But before she could, my Uncle Douglas stood up, his face red with anger. All right. This has gone far enough, he said. Natasha, this is petty. You've made your point. And you've ruined what should have been a celebration. Are you happy now? I turned to him, my hands trembling but my voice steady. No, Uncle Douglas. I'm not happy. I'm sad that it had to come to this. I'm sad that the only way any of you would notice me was if I owned the one thing you cared about. And I'm sad that, even now, you still don't get it. The room was quiet again, the weight of my words sinking in. I felt the tears welling up but refused to let them fall. I wasn't going to cry, not here. Not now. And then, to my surprise, my mother spoke. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. She's right, she said, looking down at her hands. We haven't been fair to her. I haven't been fair to her. I looked at her, stunned. Mom. She looked up, her eyes meeting mine. I'm sorry. Natasha. Truly. I see you now. I do. The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. And for a moment, I didn't know what to say. But before I could respond, Claire stood abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. I can't believe this, she said, her voice breaking. This was supposed to be my night. She stormed out of the room, Jude following close behind, calling her name. The door slammed behind them, leaving the rest of us in an uneasy silence. Well, Ethan said after a moment, his voice cutting through the tension. That went about as well as expected. I managed a weak smile, but inside, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and something that felt almost like hope. Maybe, just maybe, things could start to change. The door's slam echoed through the grand dining room, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. I stood there, feeling the weight of years of emotions finally released. But the aftermath of it all was beginning to settle in. My family sat awkwardly, their gazes darting between me and the empty space where Claire had stormed off. Well, Uncle Douglas grumbled, breaking the silence. What a fine mess this is. My father sighed deeply, pinching the bridge of his nose as if trying to stave off a headache. Douglas. That's enough, he said, his tone firm. We've all had a hand in this. And it's time we take some responsibility. I looked at my dad, surprised by his sudden shift in tone. For as long as I could remember, he had always been the mediator, the one who smoothed things over and avoided conflict at all costs. To see him acknowledge the deeper issues in our family was unexpected. He turned to me, his eyes heavy with regret. Natasha. I didn't realize. I didn't see what we were doing to you. I don't think any of us did. I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. Dad. It's not just about this wedding. I said quietly. It's everything. 4 years. I've felt like I didn't matter. Like my accomplishments were invisible compared to Claire's. This wasn't about ruining her night, it was about finally having my moment. He nodded slowly. And you deserved it. We were wrong to overlook you. My mother reached across the table, placing her hand over mine. I'm sorry. Natasha, she said, her voice trembling. I should have been better. I should have been there for you. Tears prickled at the corners of my eyes, but I blinked them away. I don't want apologies, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I just want things to change. I want us to actually be a family, not just for Claire, but for everyone. Uncle Douglas cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. You're right, he admitted gruffly. Canceling that vacation was a mistake. It wasn't fair to the rest of us. Especially to you, my father added, meeting my gaze. You've given so much for this family, Natasha. It's time we started giving back. I nodded, feeling a small spark of hope ignite within me. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, a chance to rebuild the fractured relationships that had defined our family for so long. A soft knock at the door interrupted the moment. It opened slowly, and Jude stepped inside, looking hesitant. She wants to talk to you, he said, his eyes meeting mine. I hesitated, unsure of what to expect. But then I stood, smoothing the fabric of my dress. All right, I said. Where is she? The garden, he replied. She's calmer now. As I walked through the estate, the cool night air hit my skin, grounding me. The garden was quiet, the soft glow of fairy lights casting a warm glow over the roses. Claire was standing by the fountain, her back to me. She turned when she heard my footsteps, her face tear-streaked but composed. I don't know what to say, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. You've always been there for me, and I didn't even realize what it was costing you. It's not just about you, Claire, I said gently. It's about all of us, Mom, Dad, Uncle Douglas. Our whole family has been stuck in this cycle for years. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I've been selfish. I see that now. And I'm sorry, Natasha. I really am. For the first time in years. I believed her. It's not too late to fix this, I said. But it's going to take all of us. She took a shaky breath, then reached for my hand. Can we start over? Maybe not as princess and assistant, but as equals. I smiled, squeezing her hand. I'd like that. We stood there for a moment, the tension between us dissolving into something softer. So she said, a small smile breaking through. Does this mean I still get to use the venue tomorrow? I laughed, the sound breaking through the stillness of the night. Of course. But maybe ease up on the pink requests. Claire groaned, rolling her eyes. Fine. White roses it is. As we walked back toward the estate, I felt lighter than I had in years. The cracks in our family were still there, but for the first time, it felt like we were all willing to mend them. Maybe the perfect wedding wasn't about the venue or the decorations, it was about the people who stood beside you. Flaws and all. And for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged. The morning of the wedding dawned crisp and bright, the sunlight spilling over the Bellamy Estate's elegant gardens. I stood in my office, sipping coffee as I watched the preparations unfold on the security monitors. Florists busily arranged bouquets. Caterers carried trays into the ballroom, and the bridal suite buzzed with activity. It felt surreal to see the venue alive with so much energy, knowing the role I had played not just in its creation, but in everything leading up to this moment. A knock at the door broke my reverie. Come in, I called, setting my mug down. It was my father. He stepped inside, his expression softer than I'd seen in years. You look beautiful, he said, gesturing to my sleek red dress. Thanks, Dad, I said, smoothing the fabric self-consciously. What's up? He hesitated for a moment before sitting across from me. I wanted to check in, he said. After everything that's happened, I want to make sure you're okay. I'm fine, I said, though my voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. Better than fine. Actually, for the first time in years, I feel like I'm finally being heard. He nodded, his gaze dropping to the desk between us. Your mother and I had a long talk last night, he admitted. We realized how much we've overlooked. How much we've taken for granted. You've done so much, Natasha. More than we ever realized. I felt my throat tighten. But I forced myself to stay composed. It's not too late to fix things, I said. But it has to be real. I need to know that this isn't just about last night, that it's a real change. It will be, he promised. His voice resolute. Starting with that family vacation we cancelled. We're rescheduling it. And this time, it's for everyone. Including you. I smiled. A small but genuine warmth spreading through me. I'll hold you to that. He stood, placing a hand on my shoulder. We'll see you out there, he said before leaving the room. Once he was gone, I turned back to the monitor, watching as Claire made her way toward the ceremony site. Her dress billowing behind her. Jude waited for her under the gazebo, looking nervous but hopeful. The sight brought an unexpected pang of emotion. Despite everything, this was still her day. And I wanted it to be perfect. Underscore 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 underscore. The ceremony was simple yet stunning. Claire walked down the aisle with grace. Her smile soft and genuine. Jude's vows were heartfelt. And for the first time, it seemed like the two of them had grown beyond the chaos of the past weeks. As they exchanged rings, I glanced at my parents. Seated beside me, my mother reached over, taking my hand in hers, and I squeezed back. When the reception began, the atmosphere shifted to one of celebration. The ballroom was filled with laughter and music, the chandeliers casting a warm glow over the crowd. I stood near the edge of the room, watching as Claire and Jude shared their first dance. She caught my eye across the room, and for the first time, her smile wasn't tinged with competition or superiority. It was a smile of gratitude. Rosalie appeared at my side, holding 2 glasses of champagne. Well, she said, handing one to me. You did it. The quiet one became the star. I laughed, clinking my glass against hers. It wasn't about being the star, I said. It was about finally being part of the story. And now you are, she said, raising her glass. To new beginnings. We toasted. And I felt a sense of closure settle over me. The wounds of the past weren't completely healed. But they were no longer raw. We had all grown from this experience. And for the first time, I felt like we could move forward as a family. As the night wore on, Claire approached me, her shoes in hand and her hair slightly undone. Thank you, she said softly, her voice barely audible over the music. For what? I asked. For everything, she said. For being there, even when I didn't deserve it. For helping make today perfect. And for making me see things I didn't want to see. I smiled, pulling her into a hug. You're welcome, Claire. As I watched her return to the dance floor, I felt a deep sense of peace. The Bellamy estate had always been a place of transformation, a venue where people celebrated love, connection, and new beginnings. And now, it had given me something I never expected, the chance to find my voice and, in doing so, rediscover my place in my family. As the music swelled, my father appeared at my side, holding out his hand. Care to dance? Owner of the Bellamy estate? I took his hand, laughing. I'd love to. And for the first time, I truly felt at home in my family, in my life, and in the person I had become. As the night came to a close, I stood on the grand staircase of the Bellamy estate, watching my family laugh, dance, and come together in a way I had never seen before. The once fractured bonds were mending, slowly but surely, and for the first time, I felt truly seen and valued. It wasn't about revenge or proving anyone wrong, it was about finding my voice and reclaiming my place in the family. The lessons of the past weeks ran deep. Family is imperfect, messy, and sometimes blind to its own flaws. But it is also capable of growth, forgiveness, and love. Standing there in my perfect red dress, I realized that the real victory wasn't owning the Bellamy estate, it was owning my story. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Life Stories to explore more tales of growth, love, and life's unexpected lessons. See you in the next story.